Woman to ever be elected to Congress is now almost 6 months into her first term. In that time, we have seen a new U.S. Attorney General confirmed, action on a nuclear deal with Iran, and the launch of several presidential campaigns. Going forward, this particular lawmaker wants to shift the focus onto defense spending. Congresswoman Stefanik has had her First Amendment passed in the House, which would provide $30 million for a new missile defense site in her district. She's joining me now from D.C. to talk more. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Welcome back to Capitol Tonight.
Thank you, Liz. I'm happy to be back on the show.
So before we get started with sort of the nitty-gritty of policy, I have to ask you how you're doing. Is it living up to your expectations, and have you settled in, now that 6 months have passed?
I'm doing very well. It's been a whirlwind. I feel like my great job hitting the ground running, representing my district. But I guess the biggest adjustment for me was when I was first sworn into office, many of the Capitol Police didn't recognize that I was a member of Congress because I am the youngest. So because of this trusty pin that you can also put on a necklace if you're a woman, they let me on the House floor. So that's a step in the right direction. They recognize me as a member, and it's been great so far.
Yeah, I mean, you got a lot of attention because of your status as the youngest woman, and I think you had a spread in a fashion magazine. I know the New York Post did a pretty lengthy profile of you not too terribly long ago. Have you found that attention is actually beneficial to you, that it's enabled you maybe to have a leg up over some of the other freshmen when it comes to pushing your agenda forward?
I think it's beneficial to the district because I want to make sure that I have the loudest voice possible representing my constituents. And I've really been humbled by the attention from both some of the women's publications, but also the New York Post. But it allows me to have a voice that is elevated for a typical freshman member of Congress. And what's been incredibly humbling is the number of young women, both from my district, but frankly from across the country, who have reached out to my office to get advice and to talk about the fact that I hope I'm a role model for young women across the country who want to have the courage to step up to the plate and run for office. So I think it's an asset for this district, but it's also an asset for young women in this country.
So you did, as I mentioned, have this first resolution, or pardon me, amendment passed. It's this $30 million for a missile defense site, effectively, that would be located at Fort Drum. And it was a major coup for you, and I know you spoke on the House floor about it. Now comes news that the White House is opposed. So you're setting yourself up for a bit of a battle with the Obama administration. Where do things stand right now? My understanding is that the Office of Management and Budget feels that the authorization is premature, and they're even inside the military with military officials. This is not necessary.
Sure. So Fort Drum is actually one of 4 sites under consideration. My amendment appropriated funds for the design and planning of an East Coast missile defense site. So the final location has not been determined, but Fort Drum is one of the finalists in terms of fitting the necessary capabilities that a location would need. I got bipartisan support for this both on the House Armed Services Committee as we were marking up the National Defense Authorization Act. And this amendment passed by voice vote, which it was unanimous, and bipartisan during our appropriations discussion. So I was pleased that it got bipartisan support. I'm disappointed that this president doesn't support an East Coast missile defense site. There have been military leaders on the record talking about the importance of having an East Coast location to be able to combat potential missile attacks on the United States. It's incredibly important for our national security, and it's a net gain possibly for Fort Drum as one of the 4 sites under consideration.
Yeah, I mean, so where do you go from here? I mean, it's true that there are some who have said, yes, this is a necessity somewhere on the East Coast. There are others who have said, actually, the money would be better spent elsewhere in the military, which, of course, is having its financial squeezes, although certainly there are people who would disagree with that statement. But like anyone else at the federal level. So where do you go from here? I mean, how do you plan on convincing the Democratic Obama administration, as a freshman Republican, that your position is the right one?
Well, it already passed out of Congress, and
right.
As I said, it passed with bipartisan support, both the authorizing language and the appropriation language in terms of spending the money for the design. I'm working with my colleagues on the Senate side to ensure that it has support from the Senate, and this is one of a number of issues that the administration opposes in terms of providing for the adequate funding for national security. So I'm working with members of the Armed Services Committee on both the Senate and the House side to see this to fruition.
This is obviously, Fort Drum is a significant district. There are a lot, however, of needs in your district, which is huge. The largest, if not one of the largest, in the state in terms of geography. And there was some disappointing news, I know, for Lake Placid that Luge USA is considering decamping at a time when, you know, you're actually trying to build up tourism and economic development in Lake Placid and elsewhere in the Adirondack Park. Have you had any conversations with anybody about that, and what do you think you might be able to do to convince them to stay?
Absolutely. I've partnered with the town supervisors in Essex County specifically to try to put together a New York statewide bid for the Olympics. I think Lake Placid is so unique in terms of its tourism attraction capabilities and the history we have in Lake Placid. I was just there 2 weeks ago speaking at a fire department, so I'm spending as much time as possible with the local officials to make sure that their needs are met. And I think there's a lot of opportunities in terms of attracting tourists who are interested in recreational activities, both in the winter and the summer. So I'm trying to continue to promote what makes the North Country special.
Yeah, I mean, and specifically regarding the luge operations, I mean, they started there, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, it would be a loss, though they would continue with some training, is my understanding, both there and also in Utah, in Lake Placid and also in Utah, where they have another facility. The idea that they're sort of entertaining bids from other comers, I mean, do you think that Lake Placid might be able to do something, that Congress might be able to do something to convince them to stay?
Well, I absolutely am going to partner with ORDA to do whatever we can to encourage Luge USA to stay. Luge USA had a great promotional video that I was proud to continue to promote. Much of Lake Placid was featured in that video in terms of the unique role that Lake Placid, the village, has played in terms of supporting the sport. You know, the training capabilities we have in Lake Placid, in them, so I'm working to see if there's federal grant opportunities to provide support and maintenance for the facilities, but it's a world-class facility. As I said, it's one of the most unique Olympic sites around the world, frankly, and I'm continuing to work with local officials on making sure and educating my fellow members of the New York delegation on the importance of keeping the Luge USA in Lake Placid.
Yeah, we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you before I let you go. You know, you played a role with one of the candidates in the last presidential campaign with Paul Ryan. You helped him prep, if I remember correctly, for debates, correct? Do I have that right?
Yes, you're right.
So now, of course, we're seeing all of these various Republicans getting into the 2016 race. We hear a former New York governor might actually make an announcement, or he's definitely making an announcement. New Hampshire, he sounds awfully like a candidate these days. Do you have a favorite, and are you worried about the size of the field at this point? Because it seems a little bit like a circular firing squad, while, you know, the Democrats, though there are challengers to Hillary Clinton, she's definitely the front runner at this moment.
I actually think having a diverse field in the Republican primary is an asset. On the Democratic side, it's feeling like there's just one mainstream candidate, and I think it's important to have candidates go through their paces and really make their case to the voters in this country about what their vision for the future of the United States is. Look, I can speak to it from personal experience. I ran in a very competitive primary, and it makes you a stronger candidate going into the general election. In terms of my favorites, I'm really focused on, I've been in Congress for slightly over 100 days, and I'm focused on doing the best job I can representing my constituents. But I do have to say that it shows how deep of a bench the Republican Party has in terms of the governors, the senators. It's just a wide variety of backgrounds, and I think that the debate stage, the American public, that we have a variety of different positions and just an incredible experience.
Well, we'll have to, when things get a little bit more settled, we'll have to check back with you and see if you've actually picked a favorite yet. Until then, Congresswoman, I thank you so much for your time. Hopefully we'll see you in the district or perhaps in the studio next.
Absolutely, and have a good Memorial Day, Liz.
You too. Now, coming up after the break, did you vote?